Welcome to another program we call Perspectives El Paso. I'm Leon Blevins, and this is January of 2017. Can you believe 2017? But here we are, back again for another program. My wife, Shanna Blevins, came in the house about 45 minutes ago as I'm fixing to walk out the door dressed like this, and she's always checking me to see if I look okay. If she had said, "You don't look good," I'd had to go back and change clothes. And then she said, "Okay, what's your interview about today?" And I said, "It's about credit unions." And she said, "That's boring." And I said, "Oh, I know to you it's boring. For you see, I know my wife, she likes NCIS, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, any one of those where they dissect people and solve crimes." But I told her, I said, someday credit union can mean a lot to you, because if you want to buy a car or home loan, home improvement loan, or a death in the family or something, and we need some money, it's good to have a place we've saved some money and we can borrow some money. And by the way, for many years, my wife and I have had an account at Teachers Federal Credit Union, El Paso Teachers Federal Credit Union. An acquaintance of ours, a number of years ago, was president of the credit union, Claudia Green. We knew her and a son. And I asked Claudia to be on my program to tell us about credit unions. And she said, "No, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm bashful. I don't want to be on TV." So a few years have gone by, and recently in this very building, in the boardroom, I saw the Teachers Federal Credit Union, to whom my wife and I belong, having a staff meeting. So I asked a woman, "I want to meet your boss. Can I meet your boss?" So she introduced me to Max
Villaronga.
Veranga.
Yes, sir.
Villaronga, Max Villaronga, president now of the Teachers Federal Credit Union. Now you see, this program is not about exciting mysteries and all of those things, and car crashes and people flying over buildings. It's about something very practical for us on a daily basis. It's about money. And so we're going to find out something about credit unions, and also maybe a little bit about the difference between a credit union and a bank. But before that, Max, tell us a little bit about your background. Are you a native El Pasoan?
I'm not, actually. I'm originally from Puerto Rico. I lived for a period of time in Caracas, Venezuela as well. But I grew up mostly in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
So I got to El Paso as fast as I could.
And where was your education? How did you get over into this business of economics?
So the educational story is kind of a longer story. I attended Texas A&M University, College Station. I got my bachelor's business administration from there. A few years later, I went on to University of Texas, Dallas to get my master's degree in business there. And then over the years of working in the credit union industry, I had some great leaders that were willing to reinvest back in my education. So I went through the CEO Institute, which is a 3-year program that goes out of the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School, University of Virginia, and Cornell University. So I got my CCE from there. And then back in 2013, I was able to finish up with the Graduate School of Retail Bank Management, which is a fantastic course in banking, essentially retail banking, hosted by the Consumer Bankers Association. Typically, there's not a whole lot of credit union people that go to the banking school, but it's really the best place to go.
It gave you a broader vision of all of it.
Absolutely. And bankers really, they know their business, and they generally don't like credit union types. They feel like we encroach on their business model, but they know the business, and I had a lot to learn from that course there over about 3 years.
Well, we need to put it right up front that we know this is a business, and I'm not in the business of promoting specific businesses, but we want to know some of these important factors about credit unions and banks. Tell me, how do they differ then?
Well, really, at the core, it's about how they're organized. Some people from the outside looking in may think they're the same, but they're really not. A bank at its core is about maximizing profit. So they want to maximize their profit in order to pay their shareholders or their owners. So essentially, at their core, they're trying to take and make a living off of their customers in order to pay these shareholders or owners. A credit union is fundamentally very different. They were established in the early 1930s at the federal level, right after the Great Depression, to serve a need. Most Americans were not being well served by banks. And so many times they were having to borrow from family or friends. And we know that family and friends, those loans don't always work out real well.
They don't always get repaid.
That's right. They're not always repaid, which means that friends and neighbors and family, they're not real good at understanding the risk associated with that. So what happened was people started getting together, primarily as employee groups, and saying, let's pool our deposits together and we'll make loans to each other. And that's really how credit unions started. But fundamentally, to go back to your question, the difference is we are not-for-profit financial cooperatives. We are governed by a volunteer board that's elected by the membership. So at the end of the day, our profits go strictly back to our membership. So when a person opens up their share or puts their deposit into the credit union, they own a share of the cooperative. They have a voice in the cooperative, and the dividends are redistributed back to them. So how do they actually see that? Well, generally, our loan rates are significantly lower than you'll find in banks. Our deposit rates are significantly higher, and our fee structures are much lower. So that gets passed back to the membership that way. And sometimes if there's a large profit in a given year, sometimes they redistribute it in the form of a check at the end of the year.
Our closest association to the Teachers Federal Credit Union in the past has been borrowing money to buy cars. I know at least 2, maybe 3 cars that we bought with credit union money. The saddest one, we just bought the car. It was a used Toyota, and we bought it for our son to be able to drive, and separate from the ones we were driving. And before I made the first repayment on that car to the credit union, a woman ran a stop sign and totaled the car.
Wow.
That's how it happened.
That is a sad story.
So it closed it out real fast because it was in pretty good shape and ran well and everything, and then this woman destroyed it. And fortunately, our son was not seriously injured. But that's been our one. Now, we have some money in the credit union now as a backup in case of special needs. Sure. I have some money in the bank. We bank with a bank just 2 blocks from our house. And we keep some money in a safe, in a secure situation at home, a heavy safe. Spreading the risk. Tell us about what we should do spreading the risk. Am I doing the right thing?
Well, you know, I'm not a big fan of people keeping money at home. I think if you keep something sort of small at home, that might make sense.
It's just a few $1,000s in one big safe. Okay.
Just let me know which room so that I can check that out. But generally, up to certain levels, generally what you'll see is there are guarantee levels by the federal government through either the FDIC through banking or through the NCUA through credit unions. The NCUA stands for National Credit Union Administration. We guarantee deposits up to $250,000 through the NCUA. So generally, I encourage people to keep putting their deposits into the financial institution up to those levels, because those are guaranteed by the good faith and trust of the federal government. So unless you lose faith in that, I think we're in good shape. Certainly if they start getting over those sorts of limits for high wealth type borrowers, then we encourage them to put them in multiple different accounts, sometimes maybe one for yourself, one for your spouse, and that sort of arrangement. That way you can get the most protection that gives you peace of mind.
And of course that money in the safe is drawing no interest at all. But I remember when the credit union interest that we were drawing was higher than it is now.
Sure.
And that has something to do with the Federal Reserve Board, is that right?
It does. Generally, the interest rate environment for the last few years has been very flat and very low. And those are both not good factors for depositors or financial institutions for that matter. A flat yield curve for a financial institution makes it difficult for the institution to earn money between the lending side and the deposit side of the operations, which is one of the reasons you've probably noticed some of the smaller banks and credit unions get merged or acquired by larger credit unions and banks.
Constantly it's happening.
It's happening a lot, and it's because the regulatory environment is difficult for the small credit unions to operate in. And again, that flat yield curve makes it too difficult for the financial institution to continue operating in the long run.
What's your major regulatory agency that oversees you?
For us, it's the NCUA, the National Credit Union Administration.
Mm-hmm. And they come through an audit?
They do. They do what's called, it's not called an audit for us, it's called an examination, a federal examination. Mm-hmm. And generally it happens about every 12 months or so. And essentially they are looking to ensure that the share insurance fund is safe and sound, that their guaranteeing of the system is safe. So they're looking at our operations on the lending side, on the business lending side, on the deposit side, in a variety of different areas. They look to ensure that we are in fact safe and sound, and they sort of give out grades to some degree on that. They require certain actions if we're not following certain guidelines or regulations. But TFCU's been doing very well in that for many, many years.
Now, how many are on your board?
We have currently 10 members on our board.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And how many do you have on your staff? And I know you have several different branch locations. Mm-hmm. I've done business at least 2 of those branches. Sure. How many do you have?
So right now we have 8 branch locations, and we have about 220 personnel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed you brought some pamphlets here and mm-hmm. spread them out. And this tells about some of your services. Mm-hmm. Tell us about some of your services. I told you I have mainly used your services in the past on car loans.
Sure.
Tell us about anything else that we should know.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are surprised to hear the breadth of what we do offer. We offer typical savings products like savings, checking, CDs. You know, we call these share certificates and share drafts, but they're very similar products. Money market accounts. On the lending side, home equity loans, mortgages, automobile loans, boat loans, RVs, unsecured loans like revolving lines of credit, credit cards. We have great credit cards, very low rates on credit cards. Of course, commercial loans, business loans that we do. And then, of course, we do have insurance products that we offer, a line of insurance products. And we have financial advisory services. Many times people think they don't know that we offer financial advisory services. So if there are products that are part of the credit union and you want some other products that are not part of the credit union, we can actually provide those as well.
Now there are other credit unions, GECU and mm-hmm. some of these. Now that's government employees. Mm-hmm. Yours is teachers, but you're not exclusively teachers and they're not exclusively government employees. Is that correct?
Right. That's right. There's a lot of great credit unions in town. This is a great credit union city, and it's got a long history of fantastic, very safe and sound credit unions. They all started generally with employee-type groups, as I described earlier. But over time, the boards of those credit unions recognized that it was going to be difficult for those credit unions to stay competitive if they only stayed within those particular groups. Right. Mm-hmm. So they opened them up generally to the community. So you'll see that many of these organizations now have membership for anybody that lives, works, or worships within certain geographic patterns. So whether it's GCU or First Light or TFCU, we generally can open it up to a broader group of people. And really that had to do with the Credit Union Access Act that was passed back in 1998, where you had Congress really stating we want more Americans to have access to credit unions because it was such a value to the American population in general.
Good for the economy, keep that money moving around.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
What are your biggest challenges as the leader of this credit union?
Well, certainly growth. Growth in a population center that's sort of isolated like this. Mm-hmm. Growth is an important component for us. Regulation. Regulation over the last few years has been very onerous. I think in many cases there are credit unions that have not been able to keep up with those regulations. So eventually they either fell out of compliance and were forced to shut their doors.
Well, such as, what would be an onerous regulation?
Wow. So in general, it's the cost to keep up with the changes in regulations is generally, so for instance, I can tell you we have a department that's dedicated to keeping us in compliance with, let's say, as an example, would be the Patriot Act. So you've got the Patriot Act that, of course, was post 9/11, and it we have some reporting requirements around ensuring that suspicious type activities or suspicious individuals, that there's some reporting requirements around that, or transactions that exceed certain limits that the federal agencies want to know about. So these are things that require new systems to track, not just in single individual transactions, but across a macro of transactions. And those things start costing a lot of money.
Well, I thought about this when I heard about that regulation, that's almost like saying they think you're a guilty person on something if you're taking out a certain amount of money, over $10,000, for example, or something. It's almost perceived you must be doing something illegal. Should they be looking at us that way?
Well, I'm not sure that that's a fair, that's certainly not my perspective on it. I think initially looking at it, it can be perceived that way. But essentially, what's being tracked is simply the fact that the transaction exceeded certain parameters. Generally, the individual, they're not being looked at that closely. What they're looking for is patterns. Mm-hmm. And if a pattern starts developing, at that point, I think an agency would have a reason to look into it further. But for instance, somebody coming back from Las Vegas and just making a really big deposit because they made some money in Las Vegas, that person shouldn't be concerned about anything like that. The only people that should be concerned are people that really their activities are suspicious, and we should be worried about them as Americans for our own
safety. Did you ever have someone come to your office, say the FBI or somewhere, and talk about some money laundering going on, and they're investigating and they're checking it might be going through your institution?
We have gotten notices primarily through the mail or through phone conversation after the mail. We've gotten certain certified mail related to certain activities. Unless they have the right legal documentation, we don't communicate anything further. But sometimes they do want to follow up on certain trails. But again, we don't get into the investigation part of it. That's
Exactly.
not our job.
Right.
Our job is to serve members. But they do aggregate data in order to try to make sure that Americans as a whole are safe.
And that's part of what your staff has to do if they're looking at you for somebody else.
That's right.
What about what happened with the big collapse of the economy, 2008 and 2009? Did your organization or other credit unions take a hit in that collapse of the economy?
I would say I'm not aware of a credit union or bank that didn't take a hit. Generally, particularly in the credit losses associated with loans, I would say for sure the majority of credit unions and banks were impacted heavily during that time period because the loss reserves we set aside are built on a set of assumptions, and I would say it would be in the minority the people that predicted that particular meltdown. Wow. So those assumptions weren't built into those loss models, which means that there wasn't enough of a reserve set aside for credit losses at that time. And what essentially happened is those credit unions and banks took some smaller earning streams for those periods of time, and then they caught up in the following years. So most credit unions and banks did fine. I think there were some financial institutions that maybe if they overinvested in real estate type loans, they were probably hit pretty heavily. And it's possible if they didn't have enough capital in reserve that they may not have remained solvent.
Well, during that collapse, my 401k, as you might consider it, lost about $70,000. And my financial advisors over the years have always told me, just kind of sit tight. On the long term, it should make a comeback. A lot of people teach that about stocks too. Sure. Don't just panic and start selling off your stocks, because sometimes there's ups and downs. And usually if you're in a good value system, it should continue to come up. So most of that has come back by now.
Great.
That $70,000 before I retired. I was glad it did.
Mm-hmm.
So we're impacted by that. Anything else with regard to challenges that you face as a leader? Do you meet with other presidents of other credit unions?
We
belong
do.
to an association here in El Paso?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different groups that I meet with. One is we have a very collegial group here in El Paso, very cooperative, and we are a cooperative industry. So I meet with Crystal from GECU and Carl from First Light and Sam from Mountain Star and so on and so forth. So this is a great group of people that we use each other as mentors, and we talk about ideas and concerns and regulations and issues that we might have. So certainly we meet locally, and then at the state level, there's a top 50 credit unions in the state, and I belong to that group. So we meet usually about once a year and talk about issues that are relevant to the state of Texas, and many times we are part of the group that goes to the state capitol and to Washington, D.C. to advocate and educate, really is the word I would use, our representatives and legislators on issues that are pertinent to our membership. So we have almost 58,000 members in El Paso. So when we go to Washington, D.C., people tend to listen.
Numbers count.
They count. And many times there's a powerful bank lobby out there trying to modify law and regulation to their benefit and to the benefit of their constituents. And I think we act as an important counterbalance on behalf of the consumers because we have to play that educating role and saying, look, that regulation is important for this reason, or we think you should modify this regulation in this way because this is hurting our members. In
number of members, or maybe even the amount of money that you're handling, where does your organization rank in relationship to these other credit unions? Is First Light the largest one?
No, actually GECU is the largest in El Paso, then First Light, and then us.
Okay. Then that brings me to this question about community service. For example, First Light, the Sun Bowl Parade, and things like that. How do your members get involved in your employees get involved in community service?
We actually get involved in a lot of different ways. So certainly many of us serve on volunteer boards where we participate. I work with the El Paso Symphony Orchestra Board of Trustees and assist them, the Boy Scouts Yucca chapter in the Chamber of Commerce. We participate as a group in many different causes like the Alzheimer's Association here in town. Recently we did a project with Chelsea Clinton that had to do with a school project out of El Dorado High School.
I saw that on the news.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Well, it's really on those students and that teacher for
right.
leading by example. And they went out looking for sponsors, and we said, hey, we'll not only sponsor, but we'll go out and pick up trash with you and along the highway. And they're working on some great art projects. And so we participate in literally over 100 different sponsorship activities easily in a given year, and we really try to put those funds back in the local community. That's one of the advantages of going with a local financial institution is all of those dollars are going right back into the community. When you bank with a regional or a national organization, you don't really know where those dollars are going. Right. But I would stipulate that it's probably not necessarily locally.
Well, you may have just answered one of my last questions as we're getting close to the end of the program. If you're talking to a relative or friend and you're in this field, and go back to my wife's word about boring or exciting, what's been most exciting little time frame in there for you with this credit union?
Well, we've been in a growth phase since I arrived. The board of directors really wanted the organization to get caught up from a technology standpoint and to start growing membership at a faster rate. And they understand that that's an indication that there's a value creation in the community. And so that's really been the exciting part, is looking at new properties to put new branches in, to provide better service, expanding some of our call center operations to be able to provide better over the phone and online services to our members, looking at adding new products or services to our members. It wasn't too long ago we partnered with Representative Cesar Blanco to provide loans on site to people that wanted to become citizens of the United States.
Yeah, that's good.
And so we're doing some innovative things that are really providing value to our community.
I think we have another important question in the light of electronics and hacking. You have security people within your organization to deal with all this electronic stuff. Be sure nobody's pulling some of that money out.
Absolutely.
Let's close on that thought.
Absolutely.
What do you do?
Cybersecurity is the hottest topic right now.
Okay.
So whether it's providing our members with new chip and PIN credit card and debit cards that make it harder to replicate those transactions and replicate those cards, or we have a team that we actually hire hackers to try to hack us. So that we can see any potential vulnerabilities and plug those up before somebody actually tries to hack us. So we do that constantly. We're constantly doing that. So those are just a couple of examples of the activities that we're taking.
Well, you don't have to worry about me hacking because I barely understand how to use these computers.
Right.
I'm computer illiterate in many, many situations. Now see, to me that's exciting.
Absolutely, it is exciting.
Yeah, this is not a boring subject. To me, this is an exciting subject to find out about how my money's being used, how my money's being protected,
Right.
what it can do to benefit the community, and what some of you that handle my money are doing with community service.
Absolutely.
Max,
Thank you.
glad you were here today.
Appreciate it. Thank
Good.
you so much.
Remember, not all my programs are this exciting, but we hope that we'll have another one in the near future. I'm Leon Blevins. Tune in again.